Ma'am, you remain under oath, and thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Your Honor. You're welcome. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Fair to say your role in this investigation was to take 5 cell phones and see what content for a specific period of time that you could pull out.
Correct.
Okay. Well, the 3 phones from the officers, correct?
Correct.
And then at least to see if you could get the other 2 phones started or what you might find out.
Correct.
And would that be your entire role in this investigation?
Yes, dump the phones and provide that information to the investigator, yes.
Okay. So you weren't part of the investigative process or interviewing other witnesses, taking pictures, diagramming a scene, anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. Your specific role is you're handed a particular phone, you're given some instructions, and you see if you can find anything.
Yes, dump the phones and give that data to the investigator.
Okay. And so you're not in the context or the rest of the investigation?
No.
And I think it's pretty clear from our personal knowledge and certainly from yours, these phones are amazing little devices, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
We've come a long way in the cell phone technology area.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. From the old phone in a box or a bag, right?
Yes.
And now we have these small phones that perform all kinds of tasks for us, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And iPhone 5 is better than iPhone 4, correct?
Correct.
And each one adds more bells and whistles, if you will.
Correct.
Okay. And you talked about some of the things that these little phones are supposed to do for us. And the first one is we can talk to each other, right?
Correct.
I can call you or you could call me, right?
Yes.
And somewhere in there that would be preserved for you to find, right?
Correct.
Okay. That I call, not that, no, I suppose I should say it this way because you're a scientist. Not that I called you or you call me, but that my phone called your phone.
Correct.
Because somebody else could have dialed it, right?
Correct.
Somebody else could have answered.
Yes.
Okay. But you can tell as a scientist that my phone made contact with yours,
Yes.
or yours made contact with me,
Correct.
and for how long,
Correct.
and depending on the type of phone, possibly even from where the call was made.
I cannot tell you that information. That phone or that data comes from the actual cell provider.
So that would be for a different expert.
Correct.
But that exists.
It does.
Staying within your expertise, though, you can read the material that's left on the phone.
Correct.
What phone called, what phone,
Correct.
when, and for how long.
Yes.
Okay. Can tell if it got to voicemail instead.
It would indicate miss.
Okay. Now the phones can do all kinds of other things. We go on the internet on a lot of them.
Yes.
If I do an internet search on my phone, you're going to be able to tell from inside my phone where I was looking, right?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. And they can do all kinds of things that we used to do with pen and paper. I think you indicated they can keep a calendar.
Yes.
Okay. And many folks do that now, right?
Correct.
It's a popular feature in a phone.
Yes.
And if I keep my court calendar in my phone, and you took my phone, you could come back and say where I was on particular days, or at least where I was scheduled to be.
Correct.
My phone might not say I made it, but it would at least say that I put it down as an appointment.
Correct.
Okay. And you would keep that data.
Yes.
Right? And that's a perfectly lawful, legitimate use of a cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. And now cell phones can text messages to each other?
Correct.
Okay. And that's if I don't want to call you and hear your voice, I can just send you a message, right?
Yes.
Or vice versa.
Correct.
And that's all recorded, correct?
Yes.
And they can take pictures, right?
Correct.
Okay. It's a really nice added feature, right?
Correct.
We don't have to lug a camera and our phone somewhere now.
Yes.
And actually they take very good pictures, right?
Yes, they do.
Better than a lot of cameras, right?
Correct.
Okay. So in this case, you were given 3 phones from 3 separate officers, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you weren't involved in the context or the interview or the process that delivered those phones to you, were you?
No, I was not.
So as far as what the context or content of something might mean to a particular person, that's not your area. You're not that witness.
No.
Okay. But you were given these 3 phones, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you were given them to them through a consent form, correct?
Correct.
And I think you spoke with the prosecutor about that. there's ways to get a phone if somebody doesn't consent, correct?
Correct.
That's a search warrant, right?
Correct.
And that means if you asked me for my phone right now, and I held it up, I said, you can't have it, you can't have it, you could go to a judge such as Judge O'Donnell and say, I've got probable cause to look in Mr. Shaughnessy's phone, right?
Correct.
Judge O'Donnell could order it, and then I'd have to give it up to you, right?
Yes, to the investigator who then would bring it to me.
Okay. And in this case, you get a form that says, the person says, here, take my phone and look at it, right?
Correct.
They walk right over here, they say, you can have my phone, look at it, give it back when you're done, right?
Correct.
And you did that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Nobody, well, let me back up. A phone is a very good investigative tool, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it wouldn't be surprising that all police officers would be aware of that, correct?
Correct.
All law enforcement folks such as yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Judges, lawyers, folks like me, right?
Correct.
Okay. Because we do this on a regular basis, right?
Correct.
Okay. So these officers, to your knowledge, signed forms that said you can have my phone, right?
Yes, they signed forms.
You saw those forms?
Yes, they did.
Okay. So just for example, some officer wasn't about to throw their phone into the lake and somebody grabbed it from them, right?
No.
Okay. Or they didn't have a hammer over it and they were just about to smash all that information out of there and somebody snagged it away at the last second, right?
No.
Okay. You got them consensually.
Correct.
All right. And you could do this very quickly too, what you do.
Sometimes. It depends on the phone.
And in these cases, you did what you were asked and you got whatever data you could for that period.
Correct.
And that by no means, and I don't want to get into the other information that's personal on these phones, because these weren't police-issued phones, correct?
I have no idea.
There's a lot of other data on there, right?
Correct.
What you went through here in court with Judge O'Donnell, that isn't all that was on there.
I provided everything that was on the phones to the investigator, and I specifically indicated the time frame that they were looking for.
But, for example, and I'm not going to go into the individual officer or the content, there's personal information on there.
Correct.
Things that, as law enforcement, you perceive that as family or personal, right?
Correct.
Okay. Perhaps even some differing crime scenes?
I suppose, yes.
Okay. Wasn't your job to go through all that, but I guess what I'm getting at is there was more information than just the snippet you showed us here today.
Yes.
And you provided to them the information that they asked, right?
I provided them all the information
Okay.
that were on the phone.
And directed them to the periods of time they were interested in.
Correct.
And again, content or investigative tool or taking a picture, you're not the expert for that in this case. Why those things might have been done or what might have been said.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a moment, Judge? Sure. Ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy. Do you have any redirect, Ms. Royster?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Royster. Ms. Brandon, thank you so much for coming here today.
Thank you.
Digressing for a moment, I don't think we ever got this on the record. I believe it was discussed off the record. The lawyers will remember that the lawyers and I went to these two scenes on Friday. Mr. Brelo was not present. I believe it was mentioned off the record that his presence would be waived, but would you like to affirm that at this point, Mr. D'Angelo?
We do affirm that, Your Honor. He waived his presence and he agreed to that.
Thank you. Back then to the trial itself. Does the plaintiff, Mr. McGinty, have another witness? Or this is Royster. You stop there, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear you testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Kindly have a seat here. And please speak in the microphone. Do you have a rough estimate, Ms. Royster?
I think this is probably going to take us the rest of the day.
How about more than? Can we get this done in an hour 45 with a little break?
And try it.
Well, I
don't
just want to
think so.
alert you, sir, at this point, that you may have to resume tomorrow morning. My goal is to have you only come down here today, but if all of us start flagging, we may have to break and see you again tomorrow.
Okay.
So, but I'm not trying to rush you. I just want to get a sense. I expect that he is well aware that sometimes he has to come down twice. So thank you, Ms. Royster.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Jones.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Curtis Jones, C-U-R-T-I-S-S-J-O-N-E-S,
And with whom are you currently employed?
the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office.
How long have you been with the medical examiner's office?
Just over 15 years.
And what is your current position?
I'm the supervisor of the Trace Evidence Department.
What is trace evidence?
Trace evidence is a subdiscipline of forensic science that deals with the analysis of evidence samples that occur in small quantities, usually microscopic in nature, or it's a comparison of a known to an unknown sample, such as an unknown fiber to a garment, or an unknown piece of tape to a roll of tape, something similar to that.
Do you do any other things such as retrieval of evidence?
Sure, we do collection of the hands and bodies of victims of violent deaths, as well as examinations of their clothing for evidence for indications of bullet holes or knife holes or whatever the case circumstances may present.
Okay. And what about photography? Does that happen within the medical examiner's office at your direction sometimes?
It does, yes.
Tell us about your educational background.
I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in law enforcement with a chemistry minor from Western Illinois University, and I have a Master's of Science degree in forensic science from the University of New Haven.
Have you ever testified as an expert before?
I have, yes.
In what area have you testified as an expert?
Trace evidence exam.
And is your official title a forensic scientist?
Yes.
And in testifying, have you actually testified in court before?
I have, yes.
You have an estimate of how many times?
Testified before, and we have no objection to his testimony here.
Well, here's what you can do, Ms. Royster. If you want, you can shortcut some of the qualifications, but I suppose if you think it's important, you're welcome to go into all of them. But the point is you've been alerted that you're not going to draw an objection on the basis that he's not qualified.
Understood, Your Honor. Can you just finish that one question, Mr. Jones?
Over 200 times.
Over 200 times. How did you become involved in the matter that we're here for today?
The date that the bodies were received, I was on call that day. I was accepting new cases.
And what date was the body received?
November 30th of 2012.
Do you know around what time you would have been working?
I don't recall exactly. I think it was early afternoon, maybe.
And in what condition? How did you receive the bodies?
Received in a vehicle.
So the entire vehicle was shipped to the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know how it was transported to the medical examiner's office?
I don't. I wasn't there when it was dropped off, but I believe it was by flatbed.
And where was it stored at when it was dropped off?
We have a secure vehicle examination bay within the medical examiner's office that the vehicle was moved into.
What was the first thing you did when the vehicle arrived, or when you came in contact with the vehicle?
Cause photographs to be taken of the exterior of the vehicle.
And why was it important to take those photographs?
Document the condition of the vehicle as it was received to the medical examiner's office.
Were you able to get into the car instantly to retrieve the bodies?
No, the front passenger door was actually closed with a C-clamp. But to my recollection, the driver's door opened normally.
You said it was closed with a C-clamp.
Correct.
So is it fair to say that you couldn't just go up to the door and open it?
That's correct.
Okay. What did you have to do to get into that vehicle?
The clamp had to be removed from the door.
Okay. Did you take any photos of the inside of the vehicle?
I did, yes.
Okay. walk us through the first step with regards to taking the bodies out. What do you do?
Well, first, car is photographed as it's received. There was a sheet over the windows which was removed, and then photographs were taken of the bodies in the car as they were received from the medical examiner's office. Then, individually, the victims were removed from the vehicle. The door was opened. Myself and some other individuals removed each victim from the vehicle to the ground. There was a sheet laid out, and then we, using the sheet, we moved the body from the floor onto a body cart.
Okay, so someone was assisting you that day?
Yes.
Who would that have been? Do you recall?
Yeah, another forensic scientist within the Trace Evidence Department. His name is Daniel Mabel,
Spell his last name for us, please.
M-A-B-E-L.
M-A-B-E-L?
Correct.
Was it your job to search the inside of the vehicle?
Initially, yes. It wasn't too long after receipt of the vehicle, removal of the bodies, where a determination was made that essentially the state lab would be doing the bulk of the analysis. So once the bodies were removed, I made a cursory examination of the interior of the vehicle of what I could see for the presence of a firearm or for fired cartridge casings.
Okay. When you say cartridge casings, are you talking about bullets?
Well, bullets too, but cartridge casings were the portion of the bullet that once a weapon's fired, this portion is ejected out of the weapon on a semi-automatic pistol.
Okay. And so you were doing a cursory review for that?
Right.
And did you see anything like that in the vehicle?
I didn't see a firearm, and I didn't see any fired cartridge casings in the areas that I looked.
Do you recall the areas that you looked again?
It was the passenger front driver, and then the rear seat of what I could see. There was a large amount of items in the back seat that I didn't remove.
You didn't remove. Now, when you looked in the vehicle for these cartridges or any kind of casings, did you look with the bodies inside the vehicle first, or did you move the bodies first?
I did, again, a cursory examination of the bodies in the vehicle before they were removed, just to make sure there wasn't anything that needed to be collected right away off the body before it was removed. Then the bodies were removed, and I did a cursory exam with the bodies removed of the vehicle interior.
Do you remember the make and model of the vehicle?
It was a Chevy Malibu, I believe. I don't know what the year was.
Remember the color?
It was like a light blue.
Did you ever learn the names of the individuals within that vehicle?
Yes.
And what were their names?
Timothy Russell and Malissa Williams.
Okay. Now, when you remove the occupants from the vehicle, do you take photographs once they're removed with the sheet?
Yes.
Where are they placed once they're removed?
Placed on body carts, or gurneys, I guess they're called too, and then an overall photograph is taken.
Did you take the photographs in this case, or were they taken in your direction?
The overalls of the bodies once removed were taken. It's standard procedure in the medical examiner's office to take overall photographs of victims' bodies, either once they're received, depending on how they're received, in a vehicle, by ambulance, whatever. So that was done.
Showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 1119.
1019.
Excuse me, 1019. One moment, Your Honor. I don't think this is the one either. Showing you what is marked as State's Exhibit 1034. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
And what is this a photograph of?
State's Exhibit 1064, is that correct?
34, I'm sorry.
1034
Yes.
is an overall photograph taken from the front driver's side of the Chevy Malibu. Upon receipt at the medical examiner's office, the sheet's been removed from the windows.
1035.
State's Exhibit 1035 is a photograph taken from looking in the front passenger window at the victim's bodies in the front seats of the vehicle.
State's Exhibit 1036.
State's Exhibit 1036 is a photograph taken from the driver's window, again showing the victim's bodies as they were received at the medical examiner's office.
State's Exhibit 1037.
State's Exhibit 1037 is a photograph showing the front driver and passenger compartment taken from the driver's side after the bodies were removed.
State's Exhibit 1038.
State's Exhibit 1038 is a photograph taken from above the hood and windshield of the vehicle within the vehicle bay.
State's Exhibit 1039.
State's Exhibit 1039 is a photograph taken from above showing the roof of the vehicle as well as the front and rear windows of the vehicle.
State's Exhibit 1040.
State's Exhibit 1040 is an overall photograph showing the trunk area of the vehicle from above.
Mr. Jones, I'm handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 825 through State's Exhibit 828. Can you take a look at those photos and tell us by exhibit number what they are?
State's Exhibit 825 is a photograph showing the front of Malissa Williams. She's still fully clothed. Contained in the photograph is a 6-inch ruler placed to show the presence of 2 items that were collected as debris from the body of the victim. And actually appear in the trace evidence report for Malissa Williams as well. State's Exhibit 826 is a photograph of Malissa Williams' face taken upon receipt at the medical examiner's office. The victim is still clothed at this point. State's Exhibit 827 is the clothed overall photograph that's taken as standard procedure at the medical examiner's office once the body was removed from the vehicle, and you can see the victim is still fully clothed. And then State's Exhibit 828 is a close-up photograph of the chest area of Malissa Williams. Containing the photograph is a ruler that is showing a bullet fragment that was collected from the clothing of the victim prior to undressing, and actually that item appears as item 5 in the trace evidence report.
Handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 985 and State's Exhibit 962. Can you tell us what those are?
State's Exhibit 962 is a clothed overall photograph taken as standard procedure after removal of Timothy Russell from the vehicle. That's prior to him being undressed. And then State's Exhibit 985 is a photograph of the left side of Timothy Russell's head, and there's a ruler in the photograph, and the ruler is actually showing the location of some fibers that were actually sticking out of a wound on the victim that were collected and appears item 4 in the trace evidence report for Timothy Russell.
If you can hand that exhibit to the judge.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Jones, once the bodies arrived at the medical examiner's office, did you start working on them right away?
Yes.
And did you write any reports detailing the work that you did?
Yeah, the reports list any samples collected from the victims or any tests performed on the victims, as well as their clothing items.
I'm showing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 1200. Can you look at that and tell me what it is?
State's Exhibit 1200 is a copy of the trace evidence report for medical examiner's case number IN 2012-02024, Malissa Williams, consisting of 12 pages. My initials appear on every page and my signatures on page 12.
Handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 1201. Can you tell us what that is?
State's Exhibit 1201 is a copy of the trace evidence report consisting of 6 pages for medical examiner's case number N 2012-2023, Timothy Russell. My initials appear on each page and my signature appears on page 6 of 6.
Mr. Jones, did the vehicle have a license plate on it?
It did.
You know that license plate number?
Yes, it was FSA 3495.
And under which report would that be written under?
The Timothy Russell report on page 2 of 6, item 19, description.
After you examined the vehicle and took the bodies out of the vehicle, directed photographs, what was the next thing that you did?
It would have been the initial examination of the victim's body plus the hand examination, which consists of collecting samples from the victim's hands and performing tests on the victim's hands, and then undressing the victim or victims.
Is there a name to that test you do on their hands?
Well, it all depends. There's a bunch of different things. The chemical test that we do is called a trace metal detection test.
What is the purpose of that?
The test is designed to determine if an individual has held on to a metal object prior to being brought to the medical examiner's office.
Okay. You said you did that here?
I did, yes.
Okay. Did you have any results as it relates to Malissa Williams?
Malissa Williams was received with gloves on, so I performed the test on the gloves, and there was no reaction observed on the gloves.
What about Timothy Russell?
He was not wearing gloves, and I performed the chemical test, trace metal detection test, on his hands, and there was no reaction observed on either of his hands.
Okay. What about gunshot residue tests?
Gunshot primer residue samples were collected from both the hands of Timothy Russell and the hands of Melissa Williams, or the gloves of Melissa Williams.
You said they were collected. Did you do the actual testing yourself?
I did not. We released those samples.
You know who you released them to?
Ohio BCI.
Okay. Is there any type of visual test that you can do to detect gunshot residue?
Not gunshot primer residue, no. Not that we use.
Okay. Did you do any testing with fingernail swabs?
I collected swabs from under the fingernails of both Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, and then those samples were released as well.
Do you know who they were released to?
Oh, you know what? The Those were not released. They were retained within our DNA department.
And what is the purpose of retaining those?
They're just stored in a way that there's not going to be anything detrimental happen to them, so if they need to be tested in the future, they can be tested.
The clothes of Timothy Russell and Malissa Williams, were they removed?
They were.
Did you remove the clothing?
I did.
As she's getting set up, Mr. Jones, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. You found gunshot primer residue on one or both of Mr. Russell's hands?
Neither. All I did was collect the samples, and then those collected samples were transferred, or ultimately released to BCI.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked that. And the same with the gloves. You did the test that was necessary to take any residue off the hands and off the gloves, but whether any was found was determined by somebody else.
Correct.
Mr. Jones, I'm handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 867 through 893. These are the items from Ms. Williams. Can you take a look at those and tell us what they are?
State's Exhibits 867 through 893 are photographs that I had taken at my direction of items of clothing received with the body of Malissa Williams.
And what is this in photograph 866?
State's Exhibit 866 is an overall photograph of the white belt received with the body of Malissa Williams.
You said 867 would be what?
State's Exhibit 867 is a photograph of the black and white socks received with the body of Malissa Williams.
868.
State's Exhibit 868 is an overall photograph of the opposite side of the socks received with the body of Malissa Williams.
$869.
State's Exhibit 869 is an overall photograph of one side of the right black shoe received with the body of Malissa Williams.
$870.
State's Exhibit 870 is an overall photograph of the left black shoe received with the body of Malissa Williams.
State's Exhibit 871.
State's Exhibit 871 is an overall photograph of one side of a black glove received with the body of Malissa Williams.
State's Exhibit 872.
State's Exhibit 872 is a close-up photograph of a bullet hole labeled O located on a black glove received with the body of Malissa Williams.
One moment, Brian.
Sure.
Mr. Jones, we're going to go through some of the clothing, some additional clothing that Melissa was wearing in one moment. But let me ask you a question. With regards to the clothing, how were they stored once you removed them?
Well, actually, hold on. We'll wait.
Hold out, we'll wait.
Would you guess, Ms. Royster, that you have ready at hand those things you'll need in the next 15 to 20 minutes?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so if we can have the rustling to a minimum, and then we'll resume the questions, so we're back on the record.
Jones, while they're setting up some items, we can continue. I'm handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 894.
Well, I don't mean to be one of those people, but that's what I meant about the setting up, is I have a feeling it makes it difficult for a record to be made.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, Mr. Gallagher, we could keep the rustling to a minimum, and then when she needs something, though, I think she knows exactly where it is.
I do now, Your Honor.
And we'll be taking, Mr. Gallagher, a break in 15 minutes or so anyway, and you could set things up more readily.
Handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 894 through 915. Can you just go through those and tell me if you recognize them?
Okay, State's Exhibit 894 through 915 are overall photographs as well as close-up photographs of items of clothing removed from the body of Malissa Williams.
Malissa Williams. Handing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 916 through 929. Take a look at those.
States Exhibits 916 through 929 are overall photographs and close-up photographs of items of clothing received with the body of Malissa Williams.
Handing you what has been previously marked as States Exhibit 930 through States Exhibit 961. Take a look at those.
States Exhibits 930 through 961 are overall photographs and close-up photographs of items of clothing received on the body of Malissa Williams.
Mr. Jones, each article of clothing that was removed from Malissa Williams, would you have documented those items in your report?
Yes.
I want to move you to States Exhibit 986. Is that an exhibit you're familiar with?
No.
So that would have been done by somebody else.
Correct.
Is that label on there being done by somebody else in the envelope?
Yes.
Dr. Williams.
Correct.
Have you ever seen that fiber before? In States Exhibit 986. 986.
No. There was a fiber sample that I tested. There was a different fiber sample than this one.
Okay. Handing you what has been previously marked as States Exhibit 993 through States Exhibit 1006. Can you take a look at those photos?
States Exhibits 993 through 1006 are overall photographs and close-up photographs of the black shirt removed from the body of Timothy Russell.
And those photographs in this exhibit, those exhibit numbers, will that have been documented in your report as well?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Jones, when you took the clothes off, were you looking for anything in specific?
Yeah. Bullet fragments that could be recovered. Generalized debris that may be or may not be of value was collected. And then also looking for bullet holes, and then potentially looking at those bullet holes with the thought of being able to determine whether or not those bullet holes are entrance bullet holes or exit bullet holes, and then if there's any residue, gunshot residue on or around the bullet holes, that could be used to determine muzzle target distance or how far away the gun was from the target at the time the weapon was fired.
And when you're looking for the bullet holes to see whether or not there's entrance or exit, are you looking on the bodies or are you looking at the clothing? Or both?
The clothing.
The clothing. Same thing with, did you say residue or stippling?
Gunshot residue, various types. If it's the presence or absence on or around the bullet holes can be useful for determining muzzle to target distance.
Okay. And when you see bullet holes on the clothing, did you mark them in some way?
I did.
How did you mark them?
For Timothy Russell's clothing, for his shirt at least, due to the large number of holes that were present, I just
You just talk about the labeling, like what did you put on there?
right. I put yellow arrows that pointed to the location of the bullet holes, and then on those arrows, it would indicate whether it was the front or the back side of the shirt, and then an indication about where on the shirt, like upper left, upper right, middle.
Okay, and you would have put those on the articles of clothing themselves?
Yes.
Your Honor, this might be a good time for a break.
Sure. Sir, you remain under oath and obligated to return to the stand, and we'll go back on the record at, I guess at 10 after. And the latest we'll go to is 5. We might even break slightly earlier, but we'll see what happens. Thank you. See you soon.